Burkina Faso security forces have uncovered something explosive, a secret spy base operating in Ivory Coast, designed to destabilize the country and remove Captain Ibrahim Traoré. It wasn't just a hideout. It was a fully funded, foreign-backed command center, with names, money trails, and weapons linked to a much larger plan. But who was behind it? Let's find out. At first glance, April 16th was just another date in a long list of turbulent days for West Africa. In Ouagadougou, reports broke of a foiled coup attempt. Arrests were made. Rogue soldiers had tried to breach sensitive zones near the presidential complex. The state television offered minimal detail, and international outlets didn't bother digging deeper. It was the kind of event that had become almost expected in the Sahel. Restless troops, shifting loyalties, another failed grab for power. But this one didn't disappear into the fog of West African politics. It lingered. It demanded an explanation. Because something about it was too clean. The coordination was too sharp, the logistics too advanced, and the equipment too expensive for a few disgruntled soldiers acting alone. Investigators quickly found themselves looking at a coup that didn't feel local at all. It felt engineered. It started with the transport. Burkina Faso security intercepted hundreds of brand new motorcycles and more than 160 tricycles staged in rural zones bordering Ghana and Ivory Coast. They weren't for commuting. These were tactical units, light, mobile, capable of navigating forest routes and unmonitored terrain. They were perfect for quick border crossings and rural insurgency, not urban protests. Even more strange, many of them were imported, paid for in bulk, and stored under fake agricultural licenses. The question was no longer who tried to strike, but how they got the tools to do it. Then came the communication devices. Investigators uncovered encrypted radio sets and satellite phones, devices not typically accessible to low-ranking soldiers. More alarming was that these devices had been routed through commercial shipments weeks in advance, disguised under NGO and corporate labels. One crate, registered to a health charity, contained secure communication kits more advanced than anything in Burkina Faso's military inventory. That's when the mood shifted inside the intelligence community. This wasn't an uprising. It was a professional operation. Digital forensics teams began combing through call logs, message history, and location pings. Patterns emerged, ones that pointed not to rural dissidents or isolated commanders, but to coordinated movements between Ouagadougou, Bobo Dioulasso, and Abidjan. WhatsApp messages were carefully worded, full of euphemisms, but unmistakably operational. Phrases like "the fuel is ready" and "weather is clear for delivery" were repeated across multiple locations and users. Most striking were the timestamps, coordinated down to the minute, across 3 cities, often across borders. That's when investigators began hearing a name: Atakub. The word appeared as a drop point, a meeting zone, and once even as a launch site. Initially dismissed as a minor neighborhood in Abidjan, Atakub didn't seem important until they found it referenced in an old file. During the Ivorian Civil War, it was a military stronghold. Later, it housed paramilitary operations, and now perhaps something else entirely. What linked this all together, though, wasn't just the logistics, it was the money. Bank transfers between certain Ivorian-based business accounts and Burkina Faso individuals raised red flags. Massive sums, some in CFA, others in euros, moved discreetly over 3 months before the coup. These weren't petty payments. They were salaries, the kind you pay for silence, obedience, and betrayal. Every discovery led to the same conclusion. Someone outside Burkina Faso had planned, funded, and equipped an internal collapse. This changed everything. The so-called coup wasn't a spontaneous military revolt. It was a multi-pronged incursion, masked as internal dissent, with the fingerprints of foreign planners on every piece of paper and wire. And that's what made this discovery even more dangerous. Because now, the investigation wasn't just about stopping an overthrow. It was about exposing something that was never meant to be found. The kind of thing that isn't written in headlines or said in press conferences. The kind of thing that lives just outside the boundaries of diplomacy, cloaked in plausible deniability. Something was being run from beyond the border, and the coordinates kept pointing in one direction: to Abidjan, to Atakub, to a spy base no one admitted existed. but that would soon become impossible to ignore. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. What Burkina Faso found didn't just lead them across a border, it led them into a neighborhood with a history of conflict, power, and secrets. Atakub, a district nestled inside Abidjan, the economic capital of Ivory Coast. At first glance, it's just another busy part of the city. But for those who know its past, it's a place soaked in silent wars. During the Ivorian Civil War, this area wasn't just a battlefield, it was a launchpad. And now, in 2025, it seems to have hosted a different kind of war altogether. One of shadows, wires, and whispered plots. Burkina intelligence wasn't chasing rumors. What they found was far too organized to dismiss. Hidden in plain sight, camouflaged among civilian buildings and repurposed military facilities, was an operations center. Not some amateur rebel outpost, but a professionally run intelligence hub. They allege it was used to coordinate destabilization efforts against the Burkina state, specifically to monitor, discredit, and ultimately remove President Ibrahim Traoré from power. And this wasn't just a rogue operation. According to sources within Burkina Faso's military command, the base had layers. Separate wings for digital surveillance, logistics coordination, encrypted communication, and storage of tactical gear. More disturbing was the discovery of multiple identities and cover documents, allegedly used by operatives to travel between Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, and other West African states undetected. Some of the names traced back to Burkina nationals who had disappeared months earlier, their loyalty bought or blackmailed into silence. But the most chilling revelation wasn't what the base contained, it was what it represented. This wasn't just a staging ground for one operation, it was a permanent installation, designed for long-term disruption. Intelligence officials believed this base was in operation for at least 2 years, collecting data on political figures, leaking disinformation, coordinating with local actors to stir unrest, and mapping Traoré's movements. The goal wasn't to create chaos overnight, it was to slowly erode his support, weaponize the narrative, and present the illusion of a collapsing state. The funding trail, as reported by Burkina sources, paints a picture of intentional corruption. Billions of CFA francs, allegedly funneled from Ivorian state actors, were used not only to build and maintain the facility, but to pay mercenaries, bribe Burkina officers, and fund anti-government media operations across the Sahel. The money wasn't hidden, it was laundered through fake development projects, cross-border trade fronts, and ghost payrolls. There was even evidence of targeted psychological operations. According to internal reports, the base had rooms dedicated to digital warfare, rooms where false narratives were manufactured, social media campaigns were launched, and anonymous leaks were prepared to undermine Traoré's legitimacy. From fake polls to AI-generated news clips, the strategy wasn't to overthrow the government by force, it was to make people believe it had already fallen. At the center of this setup were individuals with diplomatic protection. One Ivorian intelligence officer, speaking off the record, admitted that the location had been under surveillance by foreign entities as well, hinting at a much wider network. Names weren't given, but the implication was clear. External powers had eyes and ears inside Atakub, and they weren't just watching. They were participating. And the location? Atakub wasn't random. It's close to key transport hubs, including the port and airport. It's densely populated, allowing operatives to disappear in crowds. It has historical links to the Ivorian security elite. It was the perfect cover, and perhaps most importantly, it was far enough from the front lines to avoid suspicion, but close enough to pull strings inside Burkina Faso in real time. By the time Burkina officials presented this evidence to their regional allies, the room fell into silence. This wasn't just about ivory-colored walls and hidden rooms. It was about what happens when a neighboring state, knowingly or not, becomes the host of a foreign-backed plot. And once that line is crossed, the next question is no longer where, but who. Who allowed this to happen? Who benefited from it? Who stood to gain from Traoré's fall? The spy base may have been hidden, but its purpose wasn't. To bleed out Burkina Faso's revolution before it could inspire the rest of the continent. And now that the curtain had been pulled back, someone was going to answer for it. The discovery of the spy base in Atakub wasn't just shocking, it was personal. It wasn't just about maps, hardware, or encrypted comms, it was about betrayal. The more Burkina Faso's security service peeled back the layers, the more they realized this wasn't the work of low-level traitors or desperate militants. This was being coordinated by someone with reach, someone who knew the terrain, who could move money and men like chess pieces. And the deeper they dug, the clearer one name became. It wasn't a general. He wasn't a minister. On paper, he was practically invisible. But in the world of political subversion, he was the invisible hand. A fixer, a liaison, a broker of betrayal. What made him dangerous wasn't just that he knew people, it was that he knew exactly how to use them. Investigators tied him to a web of covert meetings, digital footprints, and cross-border transactions. He wasn't working alone. He allegedly connected the dots between disillusioned Burkinabe military officers, Ivorian intelligence handlers, and foreign mercenary groups operating under civilian disguises. He arranged meetings in Ghana, wired money from Senegal, and used a network of encrypted phones to maintain constant contact with teams across the region. One intercepted conversation reportedly captured him describing Traoré as a fire that must be suffocated, not extinguished. That line alone sent a ripple of urgency through Burkina Faso's intelligence agencies. This wasn't about defeating Traoré in open conflict. It was about wearing him down from every angle, internally through distrust, externally through propaganda, regionally through pressure. But he didn't build that machine himself. What made his role so pivotal was who protected him. Several of the operatives tied to his ring were found to be traveling with diplomatic clearance from the Ivorian government. Some held passports issued under false identities. Others moved seamlessly across ECOWAS borders with seemingly no resistance. That level of access doesn't come cheap, and it doesn't come without political cover. Burkina Faso's Internal Security Council grew bolder in its accusations. Not only was he allegedly coordinating the sabotage from within Abidjan, but he was doing so with the full knowledge, or at least the blind eye, of high-ranking Ivorian officials. And behind those officials stood Alassane Ouattara, the president of Ivory Coast. Ouattara, once seen as a regional stabilizer, now stood accused of harboring elements directly involved in targeting a neighboring head of state. And the timing couldn't be ignored. With Traoré spearheading a movement to sever Western military and economic influence across the Sahel, Ouattara's government, long viewed as a key partner of France, suddenly looked like a proxy outpost for foreign interests trying to protect the old order. At this point, the Burkinabe narrative shifted. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated containment strategy. The goal? To ensure that the fire Traoré represented never spreads beyond Burkina Faso, because his survival isn't just political, it's symbolic. He represents a model of defiance, of military-led reform, of sovereignty without foreign aid. And for those who benefit from African dependency, that model is unacceptable. But even Ouattara might not be the final link in the chain. While Burkina Faso's public accusations remained focused on Ivory Coast, whispers within the corridors of the intelligence community suggested something more. A foreign intelligence signature. One that didn't operate from Abidjan, but from much farther away. France, the former colonial power with long-standing military bases and financial ties in the region, was quickly pulled into the conspiracy web. Though direct evidence hasn't been presented publicly, analysts noted patterns. Logistical coordination resembling French intelligence tactics, money trails routed through French-aligned financial institutions, and media campaigns echoing narratives historically pushed by Francophone outlets. It may sound speculative, but in the world of power politics, plausible deniability is part of the architecture. In pro-government media and among rising youth movements, the theory has become gospel. France, frustrated by the collapse of its influence in Mali, Niger, and now Burkina Faso, is allegedly using its remaining allies, like Ivory Coast, as tools to reclaim its grip. And some figures are simply the foot soldiers of this invisible empire. If that's true, it's no longer a local issue. It's a continental battle between new sovereignty and old control. What began with a name has now exploded into a diplomatic wildfire, one that threatens to fracture regional trust and plunge West Africa into a new kind of war. One fought not with armies in uniform, but with agents, alliances, and silence. And with the architects now partially revealed, one terrifying question remains. How many more are still hiding behind the curtain? Once Burkina Faso identified the players, Ivorian collaborators, and alleged foreign sponsors, the question naturally evolved, how was this war supposed to unfold without bullets? If the plan wasn't a direct military confrontation, then what was the method? The answer was chilling in its simplicity: narrative warfare. This wasn't about tanks rolling in. It was about something much quieter and far more effective: changing how people think. What Burkina Faso uncovered wasn't just a physical spy base, it was the command center for an information war, designed to fragment Traoré's image, divide the population, and make the government collapse under the weight of public doubt. At the heart of this operation was a hybrid strategy: psychological warfare, digital manipulation, and cross-border perception engineering. Instead of guns, they used WhatsApp messages. Instead of soldiers, they used influencers. Instead of explosives, they used fake news. Burkina Faso intelligence sources allege that one entire wing of the Abidjan spy base was dedicated not to espionage or logistics, but to content creation. Their mission was to distort reality. Forged government memos, faked economic reports, altered videos of Traoré's speeches, these weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a systemic effort to construct an alternate version of Burkina Faso, one where the state appeared weak, divided, and teetering on collapse. The goal was to create a mirror reality, a digital version of the country where everything looked worse than it was. In that version, Traoré wasn't a reformer, he was a dictator. Infrastructure wasn't improving, it was crumbling. The military wasn't loyal, it was plotting. This false narrative was then disseminated through ghost news sites, regional media, anonymous Twitter accounts, and even YouTube channels speaking in local dialects to target rural populations. What made this strategy dangerous wasn't just its reach, it was its timing. The content was released in waves, aligned with real-world events. Whenever Traoré launched a new development project, a counter-campaign would begin online, claiming the funds had been stolen. Whenever the military succeeded in clearing out insurgents, anonymous sources would claim it was a secret deal with militants. Over time, the truth didn't matter. Doubt became the weapon. This explains why Burkina Faso responded not just with force, but with its own counterintelligence media campaign. In the weeks following the spy base exposure, pro-government media flooded the airwaves with behind-the-scenes footage, community interviews, and fact-checking segments, not to convince the West, but to reclaim the narrative at home. Even more concerning was how the psychological warfare extended beyond national borders. Neighboring countries, especially Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso's closest AES allies, also began detecting suspicious narrative shifts in their digital ecosystems. Accusations that Mali's transition government had no real roadmap, or that Niger was negotiating with the West behind closed doors, started spreading across regional platforms at suspiciously coordinated intervals. This regional disinformation campaign suggested a larger goal: to fracture the alliance of Sahel states before it solidified into a serious continental force. By turning its members against each other through mistrust, the AES could be neutralized without a single shot fired. Traoré's government, already wary of cyber influence, took decisive steps. Telecommunications authorities began tracking internet traffic anomalies. Officials requested help from neutral tech experts across Africa to analyze the origin of coordinated posts. A pattern emerged. Many digital attacks on Burkina Faso were routed through servers in Europe and West Africa, suggesting a layered approach: local delivery, foreign design. And the digital war wasn't limited to news and text. There were even attempts to manipulate financial perception. Fake analytics reports showed currency instability, false inflation data was seeded into investor forums, and forged business articles painted a picture of collapsing trade relations. These tactics were designed to scare off international partners, isolate the government diplomatically, and pressure it into political submission. But perhaps the most sophisticated attack was emotional. Content creators, working from the Abidjan base, targeted Burkina Faso soldiers and youth, using stories of betrayal, economic hopelessness, and alleged government cruelty. They weren't just targeting policy, they were targeting hope. If a soldier begins to believe he's fighting for nothing, if a student thinks the system is rigged, the enemy doesn't have to invade. The people will dismantle themselves. That's the cruelty of narrative warfare. It doesn't need to win. It just needs to confuse, exhaust, and divide. And now that Burkina Faso has seen the battlefield clearly, it's no longer wondering how the attack came. It's asking who else was already infected. Because the war on Traoré wasn't just being waged in Ivory Coast. It was happening in the mind of every Burkina-Faso citizen. Now Burkina Faso stands on a knife's edge. It has uncovered the network. It has exposed the strategy. It has survived the first wave. But survival is not victory. Victory comes only if the country can finish what it started. Not just rejecting foreign interference, but proving that it can thrive without it. And if that happens, if Traoré succeeds despite the spy base, the psyops, the mercenaries, and the misinformation, do you think it will be possible? Is there anything stronger than Traoré? Let us know in the comment section. Can they win against Traoré? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.